Welcome everybody. I think we'll make a start because it's not a very long session today, but we've got a lot of really interesting things to cover. So thank you everybody for coming along today to the Digital Skills in Social Care event with the Faculty of Clinical Informatics. I'm just going to start with the really boring housekeeping aspect. Sorry, I know you're all bored of hearing things like this at everything you go to. Everybody is muted, but do please feel free to put any comments, any questions for our panel today in the chat box, and I'll be keeping an eye on that, and we'll pose them to the questions for our fantastic panel at the end. We are recording this session and we will be uploading it to the faculty website and YouTube. So for those who would like to listen back, or for those that were unable to come today, they will be able to catch up with that at a later date. So next slide, please, Lindsay. I'm going to get straight into this and just introduce the fantastic panel that we've got today. So we've got Mark Nicholas, who is the Chief Social Worker and Social Care Lead at NHS Digital, Tommy Henderson-Ray, who is another social worker actually and Programme Manager for Skills and Networks at NHSX, Denise Turner, who's Senior Lecturer in Social Work at the University of Chichester. Susie is here, but we've got Claire Collett speaking on behalf of occupational therapists today. And we've got Hilary from the National Activity Providers Association. It's a really busy week for Hilary as well, because it's the week for activity providers. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mark and he will talk you through some fantastic slides.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you to Lindsay and the team at FCI for putting on this event today. I think it's going to be really interesting. I'm really interested to hear some of the other speakers as well. So just a little bit about me. I'm Mark Nicholas. I'm the Chief Social Worker at NHS Digital. Who knew there was a Chief Social Worker at NHS Digital? But I think it's symptomatic of the way that we're now making sure that social care is included much more in the conversations that are taking place within the health service around social care. So my background is in frontline social work, both as a practitioner and a manager. But for the past 6 years, I've been working in NHS Digital on the digital agenda. So what I'm going to tell you about today is some of the kind of basics around the NHSX skills and tech review. But also I wanted to get into a bit of a conversation about why digital skills are important to us as people who work within social care, and hope to get some good questions on that. So next slide, please, Lindsay. So the skills and tech review was published in December. So if you Google NHSX skills and tech review or tech and skills review, as I've got it on this slide, then it will take you to the website where NHSX website, which will give you a summary of the review, and then to an Ipsos Mori site, which will give you the full review. So just in terms of background, NHS Digital had a social care programme up until March last year, which was one of the drivers for us wanting to know more about digital skills in the social care area. We did some research in association with Sky in 2016 on information and technology in social work. We've been working very closely with Skills for Care, who did some research on core digital skills in 2016, particularly focused on the social care provider workforce. And then we did quite a big piece of research in 2019, published just as the pandemic started, not a great time, on digital capabilities for social workers. And you can find all of those materials on the Sky and BASWA websites. And we were really keen to understand about the digital disparities between health and social care. And, you know, the fact that there was a huge investment going into digitization in healthcare, and in a way there was a danger of that exacerbating some of the differences and the degree of integration that could be achieved between health and social care, given that social care wasn't getting the same investment. So that's the background to the review. Next slide, Lindsay. So some of the key themes. So first of all, the review was commissioned in December 2020, and that was a kind of triumvirate of Skills for Care, who already have a great deal of expertise in this area, Ipsos Mori and the Institute of Public Care. So they undertook the research, and it took them about a year prior to publication. So they had a really good and deep look at what was happening in the sector. Some of the key findings from that, first of all, about confidence. So confidence rather than skills seem to be the main barrier to people's adoption of digital technology, and by confidence, it was about familiarity and opportunity. So being able to be familiar with the technology that needed to be used, but also having the opportunity to use it in a work context. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. There was widespread use of digital technology, but often it was using personal devices and personal systems, things like WhatsApp. So obviously in a work context, there were some security concerns about that. Issues about unreliable connectivity at work. So we know that NHSX are undertaking a huge kind of drive towards better connectivity for social care providers in particular. And there were a lot of issues about people not being able to get on the internet or having unreliable or even no Wi-Fi in their workplace. Age was a factor, as you might expect. Interestingly, younger people were more confident about using technology, but older people were more willing to ask for support, which was interesting and kind of tended to balance out those age factors. The focus seemed to be on acquiring skills in the current role that people were in. So what that means is that often the full potential of digital was not being realized. Because people were only thinking about how it could be used in this current job rather than how it could be used in an extended way across the organization. And there were some concerns from staff, and I think I've heard this particularly from social workers in the past, about digital replacing face-to-face. And I know during the pandemic that had to be the case, but a lot of professionals are not wanting that to happen in the longer term and wanting to get back to some proper face-to-face work. And there's not always a recognition about the role of technology in enabling a particular individual that somebody's working with. So more of a sense that digital is a barrier rather than an enabling factor. In terms of learning and development, I thought this was really pertinent because it's something I've definitely come across before. So it's not just about training for people, but it's also about support. And a few respondents to this various different surveys said that buddying was especially important. So where somebody more competent in use of a particular technology was buddying up with somebody who was learning more about it. So that was a really important and good idea, I think, in terms of how we implement digital technology at work. And then a lot on digital leadership. So by digital leadership, we don't just mean people, leaders considering digital to be an important factor in all this, but also the necessary work around planning, producing business cases for an investment in digital technology, and for things like change and project management, which seem to be lacking in many areas within the sector. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to finish on this. So why, we've had all this information and this research, and we've got a really good basis around digital skills now, but really why are they important? And I just wanted to give a personal perspective, having been involved in this area for a little while. So for those receiving social care services, there's a real potential for digital to improve care, not just to act as a barrier, but to actually improve the care that people receive, and to improve their own self-care as well. For people living at home, we know that in certain circumstances, digital technology can allow them to remain at home for longer if that's what they wish to do. Digital can provide a wider range of services to people and better access to those services. and also support their independence in doing what they need to do and what they want to do in their day-to-day life. So for those working in social care, so many of you on this webinar, I guess, digital can free up time and other resources. I know it doesn't always do that, but the potential is there within digital to be able to do that. And I think where it doesn't do that, often it's down to the lack of influence and guidance from social care professionals on how digital is developed. So within the health service, it's fairly normal for clinicians to be involved in the development of new systems. That's not the norm within social care. So my challenge, I guess, to all of you is the more that we get involved as social care professionals in the development of new technology, the better that technology will meet our and the people that we're working with's needs. So we need to have better influence and guidance from care professionals on how digital is developed. And also for us, it provides us with another set of marketable skills. You know, we can put it on our CV that we've done training in these various different things, that we've been involved in introduction of a new system, and those kinds of things will become more and more important as we move more into this integrated and interoperable world. And then for those who supply technology to social care, having a better involvement from the workforce gives better access to those suppliers and developers to subject matter experts, SMEs, sorry for lapsing into acronyms there. It will produce products which better meet people's needs, and it can give those companies a real market advantage. So that's it really from me. I just wanted to make those personal comments at the end and also provide that kind of challenge to us all really in getting more involved in digital as part of our careers as we go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Mark. That was really interesting. I'm going to hand over now to Dr. Denise Turner, who's going to talk you through a fantastic chapter for a book that has been written. I'm really looking forward to hearing about this.
Thank you very much. And like Mark, I'd like to thank the FCI for inviting me here today. My name's Denise Turner, and I'm a registered social worker, and I currently work as a senior lecturer at the University of Chichester. And I've been asked to come along today just to talk about a book that we have coming out. So it's a sort of shameless plug, amongst other things. But I do want to pick up on some of the themes that Mark's already talked about. So could I have the next slide, Lindsay? Thank you. And I thought I'd just pick up on the theme of age, actually, Mark, that you were talking about, and confidence. And this first quotation is some of you will recognise is from Sherry Turkle's book, Alone Together, which is about 11 years old now, where she says the connected life encourages us to treat those we meet online in something of the same way that we treat objects. And I think that used to be my position, actually, probably around that time. I was very suspicious of online connection. And when I first came into academia, I remember thinking, you know, I wasn't going to have much to do with this. And I had a conversation with a much younger colleague about a chapter in a book which was devoted to setting up a card index. And he said to me, "What's a card index?" And I started to realise that actually I needed to think about my own kind of openness to change. Next slide, please, Lindsay. And there, many of you will be familiar with this model, but I've just put it up because I think this was very much me at the time, thinking about, well, actually, how am I going to be able to use online digital technology in my work? How is it going to save me time? How is it going to help me connect with service users, with students? And I got very interested, although I have to say that I'm still not the most digitally apt person. You know, I still have many miles to travel in that way. Can I have the next slide, Lindsay? So I think my initial interest became in social media. And I remember back in the day, a colleague saying to me, actually, social media has got nothing to do with social work. We don't need to get interested in it. And I think, again, just to pick up the themes that Mark's already introduced, since then, there's been a lot of fitness to practice cases and all sorts of things that have happened around social media and social work. So this was a book that I was involved with some time ago, but I think, you know, the genie is very much out of the bottle, and now we know that actually we do have to engage with these things. Next slide. Thanks, Lindsay. So just moving on to COVID, all of us will remember this, this speech that sort of struck a chill, really. I must give the British people a simple instruction: you must stay at home. All of a sudden, I think we realised why digital connectivity was important. You know, internet use shot up. Next slide, Lindsay, please. And at the same time, the Digital Capabilities Project, which Mark has already mentioned, started to came out with its report. And this project, Mark's already said, was quite a big piece of research into how social workers were using digital technologies. And I think that the important, I've just picked out this quote from Ruth Allen. Some of you will know Ruth, she's the CEO of BASWA. And Ruth says there, suddenly these digital skills were the new normal. So you said, Mark, that it wasn't a good time for it to come out, but actually I think it was a very good time for it to come out because it was so, you know, it was so important at that time. So next slide, please, Lindsay. And again, just thinking about enabling, I just picked out this quotation from the Good Things Foundation, and it describes what's happened to lots of people through lockdown, and the way that digital technology has enabled that. So as it says there, I think, you know, before COVID, one of the biggest barriers was things like age, confidence, as Mark's already touched on, but also motivation. And what they say here is that COVID-19 has created a window for change. And I suppose for me, I've always been interested in the positives of digital connection. I know that there are lots of problems with it, but I think in social work and social care, as in health, we have to also think about the positives. Next slide, please, Lindsay. So this is a book that came out at the beginning of last year, and it was during the first lockdown, and we just gathered together the voices of different social work practitioners and academics, service users, and also social work students. And the strand that came through heavily across all these chapters was about, and this is no surprise, about the importance of digital connectivity. And Amanda Taylor-Bezic, lots of you will know Amanda, her chapter, which is the first chapter, just calls on social work to engage with digital technology, but also to do that judiciously. So also to think about the ethics of that. So picking up from that book, we have this with my colleague, Michael Fanner, who is a lecturer in health at the University of Hertfordshire. We wanted to write a kind of companion volume to that first book that looked specifically at digital connection in health and in social work. I've put Michael's picture up there because one of the important things about this is Michael and I have worked, yes, you can have a discount. I've just seen that come up in the chat. Michael and I have worked really, really closely together on this book and on other projects, but I've never met him. I've never met him in real life. So all the work, and Hilary, who's also on this call, we've done an enormous amount of work actually together now. We've never met in real life. So I think, you know, my sort of take-home message really is that, and also to encourage everyone on this call to think about relationships that they've made, that are significant relationships, but where actually it might suddenly surprise you to think, actually, I've never met this person. I've never been physically in a room with them. And of course, we're all doing this today. So next slide, please, Lindsay. This book really, I think, speaks to, and I think this is why I was invited to talk about it today. It does bring together different messages from health and social work. And quite often, I think we in social work can feel that health has been a bit ahead of us in adopting digital technology. So what we wanted to do in the book was look at different case studies and the diverse ways in which people have used digital connection in their work. And again, we've got a broad range of voices, and I'm just going to share some of those with you now before I finish. So this is my chapter. I won't go into this, but it just takes the very famous viral video of the lawyer. Most of you will know this, where he had a filter and he said, "I am not a cat." And, you know, sometimes that's me, I think, you know, where I'm trying to figure out, oh no, you know, I've not come across this before. How do I get rid of it? So my chapter is very much around the Digital Capabilities Project and thinking about how we really embed that since COVID. Next slide, Lindsay, thank you. We've got this chapter from Craig Harmon, and Craig is the director of the St John Ambulance. I think this is such an important chapter because he talks about the way in which basically they put an emergency plan in, and they had to do that by using digital technology. Next slide, Lindsay, please. And what Craig says here, as you'll see, is that St John is built around human connection. Pre-pandemic, we were digitally enabled, but we thrived on face-to-face interaction. I think that's most of us. But what he goes on to say in his chapter is that they managed to keep that human connection whilst you know, rolling out this incredible program and helping with the vaccine program as well. So, you know, I realize I'm talking very quickly, but that's because I don't have much time. But hopefully, you know, you'll be interested to look at the book as well. So this is COVID-19 in the virtual generation. This is a group of social work students who came together again through primarily through Twitter. So they found a connection, they got together digitally, and they've written a chapter about how they coped with the pandemic, basically, in what they call their transition as part of the virtual generation of student social workers. Next slide, Lindsay, thank you. And as part of this chapter, Sarah, who's one of the authors, she's a student who's got several disabilities, and actually she has found that she doesn't feel that she could have studied without digital connectivity, because she would have been so worried about going to university, about any sort of compromise to her health, that it's been technology that's enabled her to carry on with her degree safely. And she writes that she's actually quite worried about the restrictions lifting, as indeed they are today. So I think, you know, again, quite a powerful testament to the power of digital connectivity. Hilary is here today and is going to talk to you a bit about the kind of incredible journey that NAPA had. But just to flag Hilary and Natalie's chapter in the book, which you can see is called Supporting Care Homes to be Digitally Connected. I think this chapter is extraordinary just in the way that it charts what NAPA did in moving all the activity and all the work online really rapidly. Next slide, Lindsay, please. So just some sort of reflections moving forward in terms of what we learnt from bringing together the diverse voices in this book. I think probably one of the key things is that change can happen really quickly. We all know that, you know, we all had to adapt to that, going back to the "you must stay at home" speech. I can remember it was my kind of Kennedy moment, just thinking, well, how's that going to work then? You know, how are we going to do that? You mean I can't go out? And I think people, and this book's a real testament to it, you know, use their creativity to connect in different ways very, very quickly. But of course, there is still digital exclusion, you know, and we have to think about that, particularly in social work. There are people who don't have access to the internet, who don't have access to devices, who may have, you know, I mean, I've certainly worked with students who were trying to write their dissertations on their phones, you know, so it's always important to keep that in mind. And oh, look, that's just gone over my, also to think about what do we do moving forward, so that we've done a lot of firefighting, and I think sometimes we haven't been able to think about some of the repercussions of that. So we need to think about how do we move from that firefighting to consolidation, which I think is also the point that you were making, Mark. And the connections that we make, as I've said, are only as good as the technology and the learning that's available to us. So I think, you know, being able to share points as we have today are very important. The ethics and privacy issues, you know, which I know Amanda, who I've mentioned already, is doing a lot of work on, are hugely important. And what do we keep? You know, what have we learnt from this, and what do we leave behind? And then just before I finish, next slide, please, Lindsay. We also have a chapter in the book, Dr. Sandra Engstrom, who is a lecturer in social work at Stirling, who's written a chapter about the environment. And, you know, sometimes that gets missed off when we're talking about digital connection and capabilities, I think. But of course, you know, there has been a hugely positive impact on the environment from, you know, less travel, less fossil fuel consumption. And I think it's just really important to be thinking about that as well, because in terms of benefits, that's a benefit to all of us. So as I finish, next slide, please, Lindsay. Next slide. Is it not there? No. Oh, one back. There we are. So this is Amanda. I think, Amanda, you might be on this call, actually. But Amanda, many of you will know, works very closely on issues around digital connectivity and social work. Amanda and I have been friends for quite a long time now. And moving back to what I was saying about Michael, I have very, very rarely met her, actually. So a lot of that relationship has been brokered online. And I wanted to finish with her words, where she says we need to prefix everything with the word digital to understand the magnitude of the issue at hand. And I just thought that's a really kind of important message to end just my talking to you today. So thank you. The next slide is just some references. Sorry to have moved through that with such breakneck speed, but I hope some of it was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denise. There's so much food for thought there, and if nobody else has any questions, I've got lots of questions for the Q&A session at the end. I'm going to hand over to the lovely Tommy Henderson-Ray now, who's going to talk about the Hubble Innovation Project.
Thanks, Claire. I think it'd be interesting for everybody to critique these slides in light of what Mark and Denise have said, really. So I wanted to give you some practical examples of how technology in the social care space, particularly care providers. So the examples I'm going to use are residential care and supported living work, and some of the nuances that have had to be navigated. So I'm going to keep myself to 5 minutes. So the Hubble project was an example of displaying virtually how technology can be used in care settings. So people would attend virtual sessions which were hosted by the providers themselves, and they could critique what happened. The providers would tell a warts and all story, highlighting why they did what they'd done, what went really well and what was just a nightmare, frankly, and how to avoid that in the future, in a sense of really coherent peer learning. Very practically but boring from a digital sense is, how do you build a business case as an organization to do this? How do you afford the money? What do you do with it? And I think what links to the Faculty of Clinical Informatics mission is what a clearer view of what this concept of informatics might look like in social care. So I'll come on to my informatics on my last slide. So when you see these slides distributed, the the links are hyperlinked so you can see these examples in real life, but these are hosted on Digital Social Care for you to look at, just to get a flavour of that if you wanted to going forward. So can we do the next slide, please, Claire? So the first example is Parkhaven Trust, which is up in Merseyside, and they had a vision to create a setting, and it's really interesting to talk about the notion of home that Denise had talked about, the notion of home being someone in a residential care setting, and they might consider that a home as well as somebody like you or I who's independent and living in their home. This is still someone's home, and they've integrated their care planning system, which is electronic and what they record their information on, with acoustic monitoring and circadian rhythm lighting. Circadian rhythm lighting being a lighting system that changes its tone throughout the day in order to orientate somebody or help somebody who may have cognitive impairments of some description, particularly dementia or vascular dementia, to help them in orientation and therefore their sleep at night. So in other words, their lighting is dark at night or in the night, but lighter in the day, and really helping them. And acoustic monitoring, if you're not familiar, is a way of monitoring someone with consent or their family's consent through sound, basically. So in other words, a system is set up that the staff are using where they can check on a resident's movements and well-being, particularly at night time. So countering the traditional model of a care home intervening systematically at night, despite evidence to prove otherwise that a person needed waking up or not, checking on them in the process, waking them up, disorientating them, taking some time to get back to sleep, and then subsequently perhaps that resident being a little bit disorientated in the day because they got woken up, as you and I would, no different for anyone else. Whereas acoustic monitoring is a very proportionate way of checking a person's movements, learning those patterns of behaviour, and therefore the staff can understand if a person's movements are entirely normal, proportionate, and do not need any intervention, or whether they do, and thus nurturing a setting where people sleep much better and therefore are better, more awake, more alert, more independent during the day because they've slept better. No surprise that that would work better for all of us. But leading into this concept of informatics, which, if we think about informatics loosely as a definition of how we use to study structure and behaviour of an electronic system, a computer system connected to how people themselves use them. This is a great example of how that concept fits really well with social care. But I think that's really fascinating in terms of the data they use, how they've learned, what resources they've gone to in order to inform their practice. Second slide, please, Claire. Oh, sorry, Lindsay, you're on charge, sorry. Johnny Johnson Housing, which is an example of a supported living scheme where they are embracing the ever rapidly changing world of technology-enabled care, or TEC, as it's often called, a market that is moving at a rapid rate. So for those in social care, how do you know what is the right piece of technology for you or the people you're caring for, given that things move at a rapid rate? They've created a test and learn approach where they've defined a criteria for technology to be used, which is a fascinating concept, and therefore embracing the idea that people might come into their settings with their own technology, and how that can be integrated into their infrastructure, as opposed to saying, if you want to live here, you need to use this, and we don't have this, therefore you can't use it when you come here. So this is a really interesting model, which I think is perhaps the future for adult social care particularly, but their sense of creating a very wide dashboard in terms of interpreting information and talking to suppliers about what connectivity they need before they buy it, so that when a person moves into that setting, it's coherent and really set up for their care. And then finally, because I'm conscious of time, I just wanted to give you a few thoughts on this concept of informatics in social care. Does it matter? And actually, I think if we think social care philosophically, in my view at least, it's about the person, it's not about the clinician. It's about how we as social care professionals amplify the voice of people receiving care. And therefore, that is innately different to a clinician-led approach to technology. It's a person-led approach to technology. How do we amplify people's voices and empower people? So therefore, social care informatics is very different from health informatics, but we are no less richer for it. So I guess for those of you on the call who work in the health service, have you engaged with people in social care who are involved with technology? What do you know about this space? Because integration and if you think about integrated care systems, integration of information more broadly, people wanting to use their own data. Social care informatics needs to play a much wider role, but we need to work out how we amplify that using the right language that doesn't alienate people, and actually getting across that message that, you know, social care is actually really key to empowering people to live longer and better enriched lives. And how do we do that? So whistle stop tour, but that's me.
Thank you so much for that, Tommy. Next, we're heading over to hear from Claire Collett, who is an occupational therapist.
Thank you very much for allowing me to come along to this, and thank you to Susie for asking me to take part in this. Susie from Royal College of OT. Yeah, hello everyone. My name's Claire Collett. I'm one of 2 occupational therapists in Dorset Council, and we are led by our principal occupational therapist for the council. And my role is very varied. It's really a development sort of project role, so I don't have a caseload of sort of users or clients, individuals, but I do support frontline staff with any cases that they might have need to look into, you know, the provision of technology for. Much of what I do is looking at innovation around new technology, and where we can sort of test and trial some technology. So lots of my work involves pilots and looking at research really around those and the different products. I do have quite a, well, our team have quite an increased focus on aligning technology provision with obviously the council's strategic intentions, and, you know, our very varied programs of transformation. And it's a great role because I get to sort of work across sort of maybe operational side of things and the commissioning side of things in the council. So I might be sort of delivering in-house training on technology to colleagues on the front line, or I might be supporting residents themselves with technology and pilots, and generally helping staff and residents to get on board with all things sort of tech and digital. And last year we did a pilot where we tested a range of different technology, really a sort of comparing sort of tablets and laptops with some more specific products that have been designed. And it really showed us that actually for residents themselves, it doesn't matter, you know, what their abilities were cognitively, physically, we were able to sort of match the device to them, and that was really important. You know, it shouldn't be the other way around, is trying to sort of fit people into pigeonholes of types of technology. But what some of the things that I obviously also do is, you know, we look at utilizing technology in sort of many different ways. So reactive technology, that very traditional technology, but very much my role is now around preventative and enabling situations. But a lot of what we've got to do is is gradually happening is helping frontline staff to think technology first. Is there a role for technology with, you know, helping people, you know, instead of those traditional sort of services? Obviously, as I'm an OT, I love to sort of think about how technology enables someone with their occupation, and occupation can mean many things. It could mean sort of managing daily tasks like medication management. It might mean for someone who can get to work or college or maybe the day centre or their day activity safely, and also managing quite high risk situations. One of the pilots we've got coming up actually is an amazing app for people with learning difficulties to learn new skills through this app, and it really supports for those OTs out there that task and activity analysis plus a whole wide range of other things. So that's going to be a year-long pilot, and it will also be for sort of users that are coming through that transition stage, you know, 16 to 18. So we've worked with Vodafone on this pilot. We're really looking forward to trialing this app. And I also get I've got some amazing colleagues in the council. We've got many digital teams, and one of them is the digital inclusion team, and they view really tackling digital exclusion as a key priority for residents of Dorset. And they've got some brilliant initiatives about if it's improving digital skills of people, residents out there. We've got a great volunteer digital champions network, and also recently launched a digital doorway scheme, and that's sort of providing people with free devices. And I think the more you get people online and digital, the better it is for them. They can help manage their health. They can help manage day-to-day things. And also, for us, it helps us as well. So I've just set my timer for 5 minutes. And but the last slide is really about me and why it's important for me to have good digital skills as an OT, because much of what I'm doing is communicating, interacting, connecting and collaborating with fellow colleagues and obviously users. I'm searching all the time for new technology to improve people's lives. I'm hoping to solve different problems and situations, find solutions, using digital tools. And then obviously I create lots of content, to share with other people. So that's just a snapshot of what my role is, but I absolutely love it, and it's something I'm really passionate about. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire, and well done for timing yourself. That's something I need to start doing. Last but by no means least, we've got the fantastic Hilary Woodhead, and I just want to wish you happy National Activity Providers and Professionals Week. You're on mute.
It did unmute, but can you hear me now? Good. Yes, I was just saying thank you very much for wonderful presentations, and I'm just going to talk to you. I haven't prepared any slides really, but just to take you on a bit of a journey, NAPA's journey really over the last couple of years, and how we've responded to the needs of our members. NAPA is the National Activity Providers Association. We're a national charity, and we support the sector to prioritise wellbeing and promote and champion the role of the activity provider and promote activity, arts and engagement. And I think it's fair to say that prior to the pandemic, we had quite a traditional approach to our services. Most of our services were provided face-to-face, and our services are all around the professional development really, and the development of resources that enable activity and engagement. So face-to-face training particularly, and hard copy resources that our members would subscribe to and commission. And of course it became very evident very quickly that we needed to change the way in which we provided our services to meet the needs of our members. And so we embarked on a period of digital transformation, very rapid, as we said. Most of us, I think, have mentioned how quickly change can happen. I am amazed by how quickly we made these changes, completely in consultation really with activity providers out there and led by them. One of the things that we had in place was a national helpline, and that was often we would get calls about issues to do with activity engagement, ideas, challenges that perhaps activity providers or family carers might be having. And we realised very quickly that the nature of that helpline was changing. So we were getting inundated really with calls and emails about socially distant activity, how we can continue to prioritise well-being for people that are living in care homes, but how we could do that as safely as possible, obviously. But I think the main area of concern was enabling contact with family members and friends when the restrictions around visiting became really, really clear. So we did as much as we possibly could, working with our partners such as the National Care Forum and Music for Dementia, a whole range of organisations to put together some guidance around socially distant activity, but also to help activity providers gain confidence quite quickly around the use of the tech. And so we published some guidance on getting creative with tech. to help us to really, you know, enable people to think differently and think creatively about the tech that they could use. I think it's fair to say that there were some immediate barriers. Often actually the physical barriers, yes, staff were a little scared and a bit fearful themselves, but some of the physical barriers of care homes and the way that they're set up, just the physical layout, and some of them, as is mentioned, didn't have internet access. So we had a whole range of issues to kind of to support our members with around that. We were very grateful to receive some funding from the RAIN Foundation, which enabled us to extend our helpline service to make it a free phone line for people to call in, but also to set up some social media Facebook groups that would enable our members to support each other and share their ideas with each other rather than it all being led by NAPA, which was really, really important. And we also received some funding from the National Lottery to set up some monthly reflective practice sessions for activity providers across the UK to come together on Zoom and share their concerns and their challenges, but also their ideas, which was really, really important. And I think one of the other things that we really found, oops, somebody, isn't it typical, there's somebody at my door, they'll have to wait. Hence the dog's barking now too, typical, isn't it? And I think one of the things that became really evident through the 12 months of reflective practice sessions was that this is something that activity providers need all the time, that constant need to check in with each other as well, and to have a community of their own. Activity providers are often a lone voice in a care setting and feel not always, you know, they feel sometimes that they aren't part of the larger team. I think that's changed during COVID, but having that external support was becoming really, really evident. So we took the temperature, if you like. We did a couple of surveys, and one of the surveys that really, really helped us with our thinking and moving forward just was around the use of technology, particularly confidence levels, but also the opportunities, whether there were opportunities for care staff and activity staff to take part in training, because I think they had to upskill themselves quite often and quite quickly and learn from each other. And that brought lots of opportunities as well in terms of teamwork. But I think it was an issue. Where do we get the learning we need as quickly as possible to respond to the need to be more tech savvy? So just a couple of highlights really from those very small data surveys that we carried out with activity providers across the NAPA membership. So this went out to about 3,500 care homes. And they reported that before the pandemic, 42% were occasionally using technology. And that would be things like using technology to connect with family members on the other side of the world, not, you know, Betty's daughter down the road so much. And 50% reported feeling not very confident at using technology before it became a daily occurrence that they needed to use it to enable their residents to connect with their families. And then since the start of the pandemic, 100% reported using technology to facilitate digital connection, and 100% felt more confident at using technology as well. Alongside that, though, just over 50% also reported that they didn't feel particularly supported by their teams or employers to use technology, and that they were requesting, 85% requested additional tech-based training to enable activity. And I think that's quite powerful data, really. And as I said, it's just a tiny little survey, but I think it really highlights the need for digital skills training for activity providers. And I've got a quote here from my colleague Natalie. Natalie was an activity provider during the pandemic. She now works with us at NAPA as our wellbeing support manager and manages the helpline. But one of the things it's a quote from her, and it really stayed with me. It's in the book, but it really stays with me, and I want to read it to you. She says, "Each time we use a tech-based approach, we had the opportunity to explore new ways to connect with the individuals. We learned more about their interests, their backgrounds, their culture, their sense of self. This allowed us to be more inclusive. We learned more about the people. We enabled them to remain connected to the people that they love and the things that matter to them most." And I just think, you know, that's how amazing really to have had that opportunity to think quickly, to develop their skills, but also now to keep, how do we keep that going? How do we enable activity providers and care staff working in care homes to keep this digital approach going really, especially given the new and great news, of course, that visiting is now unrestricted. I have a couple of examples of how tech was used by activity providers, if we've got time to share those. Have I got time, Claire? I know I'm up against it time-wise.
We've got lots of questions in the
Okay,
Q&A, so
no worries, I'll leave those. They're in the book.
fabulous. Another plug for this fantastic book. Which actually brings me on to my first question. Can somebody please put a link to where we can get the book in the chat box so that we can get that ordered? So there's, as I said, there's been quite a few questions come in. So the first one I think is actually a really, really interesting question. It's come from Alicia. If you, our lovely panel members, had to pick one competence for all social care staff, professional as well, and it's got to be outside of anything related to legal, so you're not allowed to say IG, what would it be?
I think I've put an answer to this in the chat, Claire, but I think it's not a competence, a digital competence as much, but I think curiosity, because I think the more curious we are as practitioners in social care, the more that develops our interest and our knowledge. And then, you know, with that interest and knowledge and experience, we bring influence. And I think I've said this in another question, but I just loved that phrase from Tommy about using digital to amplify the voice of the person. And, you know, if we've got influence, then we can make sure that happens, because otherwise we get dictated to us how this works in the health service, who are kind of, you know, still fairly far ahead of us in this, and I'm not saying that our health service colleagues have got it wrong, but we need to come at it from a different angle.
I think that's great. Has anybody else got any answers? Because I'd love to hear these. Because I would have gone straight in with IG, but that's been stolen away from me as an option.
I'm happy to chip in. Again, I put something in the chat, but I think for me, it is very much about digital inclusion. I think as an occupational therapist, you know, when I trained, gosh, 20 years ago now, I don't know where that time has gone. Participation in environments was core to what an occupational therapist does. So I think in terms of a core skill, I think it's about knowing when digital is appropriate, but also how to overcome barriers so that they can use digital technologies to be able to participate in what is an increasingly digital world. It's not going anywhere even after the pandemic. People may still bank online, check timetables online. So I think that's a core competency really for anyone sort of working with people, regardless of your profession or which hat you've got on.
Yeah, Tommy, have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, it's always nice when a fellow panel member quotes you, but I think competency-wise, everything needs to go down the line of, have you co-produced with the person for whom you're caring for? And everything else, maybe this is naive, if you have that as your baseline, your plumb line, then everything else falls in line, if that's what you hold yourself to account to. So framework wise, if that's what you hold account to, then I think we start in the right place.
Yeah, I think that's really very poignant, Tommy. Denise, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say something just about the pace of change, really. So again, it's not a capability as such, but I think it links with the point you made, Mark, I think, about curiosity as well, that there is an enormous pace of change, and, you know, there are new developments happening all the time. So there is just something about time, I think, for staff, you know, and commitment. And, you know, a lot of people are having to do this sort of thing extra on top of, you know, the core sort of work that we're involved in. It gets, so I think there is, you know, like I say, whilst it's not a capability as such, I do think there is something about a recognition that actually lots of people are having to relearn things, to learn things, to relearn things, and actually that comes with a time commitment. So there is just something about acknowledging that and not expecting people to just be able to do all this stuff, you know, and the day job as well. So there's just something about balancing that too.
Yeah, it's a new set of skills that people are having to learn, despite being really competent and confident, alluding to what Mark said earlier about it's a lack of confidence sometimes rather than a lack of skills. And I think we all need to give ourselves and our colleagues a bit of time to grow in that confidence. Another question that came in that I thought was really interesting was from Ilario. Where is the demarcation line between what is digital and what is IT? Because the two different functions often have